I studied the massive, ancient tree in front of me with cautious intent. A single misstep or a minor error in judgment, and it would topple in the wrong direction, potentially causing chaos. It pained me to bring it down at all, but after that thunderstorm rolled through and lightning struck not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, there was no other choice left. Yes, 3 times. Anyone who insists lightning doesn't strike the same place twice clearly doesn't understand how nature actually works. This wasn't just any old tree, it was the tallest and most imposing one around here. Before the 3rd strike, it stood proud at nearly 180 feet. I know that because just last weekend, I climbed up, cut off the top, and measured it myself, just a bit over 50 feet. The middle section was a little longer. After removing that, I made damn sure the remaining stump was low enough that it wouldn't so much as graze my neighbor's house, even if it fell wrong. I wasn't willing to roll the dice. Today's task, though, was the hardest part. In case it isn't obvious by now, I used to work as a lumberjack. These days, I mostly prep firewood and sell it in bundles. My family's been in this house for years. Back when we first moved in, there were only 2 other neighbors, Walt, a retired guy who had already been living here for ages, and Mrs. Fraser, an older woman down the hill who'd been around even longer. But that was 10 years ago, and things have changed dramatically. Now we're surrounded by a full-blown suburban development, replacing the peace and quiet we once cherished. The woods got cleared out for pavement, houses, and artificial landscaping. What once felt wild and organic now looks sterile and over-designed. The city didn't exactly make it easy to take the tree down either. I had to jump through a bunch of bureaucratic hoops to get approval, and even then, the permit came with a bunch of conditions. The rules were strict. Once I felled the last part, I had only 3 days to chop it up and haul it out. The remaining trunk still loomed at around 80 feet, with a base almost 10 feet in diameter, and the upper limbs had spanned over 260 feet across before I started. I still had my work cut out for me. The whole thing had turned into something of a local event. Some conservationists tried to put a stop to it, claiming that, with the right care, the tree could survive another 200 years. They even took it to court. But the judge eventually sided against them, based on expert testimony from independent forestry specialists. The repeated lightning strikes had drained the tree's sap and left it beyond recovery. It didn't realize it was dead yet, but the branches would get the message come fall. At least the wood wouldn't go to waste. Walt, Mrs. Fraser, and even the judge were already lined up to benefit. Walt's shed was already packed with logs from the upper and middle sections. Today's load would fill Fraser's supply and leave a little extra. As I was planning my next cut, Walt walked over, holding a camcorder. "Mind if I film this?" he asked. "Not at all," I told him. "Just make sure I get a copy when it's done." He smiled. "Want the house in the background too? I might be able to get the whole thing tree, fall, the works." "Sounds perfect," I said. "Thanks, Walt. You've always been a solid neighbor. I'm going to miss you when you finally move on." Walt never measured life in minutes or days. He thought in decades, always seeing the big picture while others couldn't see past tomorrow. Some folks thought that was odd. He gave me a look, part amused, part irritated. "I'm not going anywhere, Eli. We've been over this." I chuckled and shook my head. "Yeah, we have." We stood near his porch, which gave us a clear line of sight to the drop zone. "Everything has its cycle," I said. "It's born, it grows, and eventually, it ends. Some things just don't last as long as they should." Walt nodded. "Yeah, nature plays by its own rules, no matter what we think." "Exactly. But at least you, Connolly, and the judge are all stocked up. Between this monster and that old cedar I took down for you last year, you should be set for a good while." "Appreciate it," he said. "No problem. I couldn't let all this would go to waste anyway." He studied me for a second. "So you've made up your mind?" "Yeah." He nodded again like he was confirming something he already knew. "It's calm now, but I'm guessing the city's going to be surprised to find out the tree's gone before the weekend." "There's a hurricane forecasted for Friday," I explained. "Can't risk having it upright in those winds." Walt raised an eyebrow. "You know a news crew is headed this way, right?" "Yep. Another reason I'm doing this now," I said. "If I wait until Saturday, we'll have gawkers, camera crews, and protesters all over the place, some trying to stop it, others just there for a show. I'd rather just get it over with quietly." "You'll manage," he said reassuringly. He glanced at the pile of gear beside us. "Looks like a full day ahead." "Yeah," I muttered. "You still want me to make those calls once it's down?" "Please. Call the lawyer first. Then Rachel about 20 minutes later." Walt let out a breath and his expression went blank. Got it. Just hope you know what you're doing, Eli. If this is what I think it is. Rachel might show up just in time. I turned away briefly, then looked him in the eyes. I've gone over this a dozen times in my head. Walt didn't blink. You already know how this ends, don't you? I hesitated. Not entirely. He watched me for a second longer, then gave a knowing smile and shook his head. Without saying anything else, he started walking back toward his house. As he reached the steps to the porch, he looked back. Give me 10 minutes to set up the upstairs camera, he said. Then let's finish this. I met his gaze and nodded. It'll be done, Walt. I walked over to my truck and pulled out my old workhorse of a chainsaw, an industrial-grade Johnsard with a 16-inch blade. It wasn't new, but it still ran like a beast. It had been a good while since I last fired up this particular saw, but tools like this were made for endurance. They don't make them like this anymore, machines with real guts. The chain was equipped with carbide-tipped teeth, sharp enough to chew through metal if needed. And that's exactly what it was built for, cutting through tree trunks riddled with nails, screws, or whatever junk time had buried deep inside. The engine had just gone through a full rebuild, and I'd personally honed the chain the day before using a diamond grinder. It was razor-sharp, fully powered, and more than ready to handle today's job. But because I was operating within city limits, I had to slap on a noise-dampening muffler, something that Walt and I both absolutely hated. Back in the day, we reveled in the deafening growl of an unleashed saw. There was something pure and raw about the way it ripped through timber. But the city made their rules, and this particular permit came with a long list of them. So fine, I thought. If I had to play by their rules today, then everyone else could live with the results later. I scanned the area one last time before lining up for the final cut. I'd already driven in 3 wedges, 2 facing south, 1 set to the north to guide the fall. If everything worked the way I'd mapped it out, the trunk would rotate slightly before falling west-northwest, landing cleanly along the sidewalk. Danielle, my ever-charming wife, liked to mock me by calling it a pirouette, like it was some kind of dance move. She always had a knack for turning my work into a joke. Still, it had been years since I took on a tree this size. Maybe I was rusty. Maybe I'd miscalculated something. God, I hope not. Having TV crews nearby had a funny way of making you double-check every step. Sure enough, a glance over my shoulder confirmed the attention. A few trucks rolled up beside a news van parked down the street. 2 guys stepped out, making small talk with Mrs. Fraser, who pointed right at me. They grinned like this was some kind of show. The whole thing had the feel of a community fair, like someone was about to sell popcorn and cotton candy. The weight of it all made my chest tighten. That tree and I had history, and I never imagined I'd be the one to take it down, especially not in front of a damn audience. I checked the saw once more, nodded to Walt, and pulled the starter. It roared to life. Well, more like purred, thanks to that cursed muffler. The sound was too tame, too civilized. Not the roar I was used to, not the kind of sound that matched what this job demanded. I pressed the blade into the massive base at a careful angle. After a moment, I paused to clean out a bit of extra wood on the south side. The northern wedge looked solid. Then, it happened. A shift. It was subtle but unmistakable, a change in balance that only someone with experience would notice. A second later came the first snap. I cut the saw, stepped back, and gave myself space to react fast if I had to. No matter how skilled you are, you learn early that trees don't always fall the way you expect. Nature doesn't take orders. Just as I'd hoped, the trunk began to tilt, rotating slowly like I'd planned, and then the top started to lean into the fall. The math checked out. I let out a breath and turned toward the house, climbing up the porch steps as the tree hit the ground with a deep, muffled crash. With splintering, a faint metallic screech, and then silence, quieter than I expected. Up on his veranda, Walt was still filming. I threw him a hand signal, thumb and pinky extended, our old cue. Time to make the calls. He waved his phone and pointed toward the news van. Live from the scene, he called out, half mocking. I muttered under my breath, "Live." The reporter edged in, camera rolling, while the cameraman stayed parked by the van, keeping a wide shot of the yard and house. Things were about to get messy. I stepped inside, carrying the chainsaw, which still hummed faintly with warmth, into the living room. My eyes landed on the coffee table, the one I had built for Danielle with my own hands, over the course of 3 painstaking months. And what greeted me? A tangled mess of someone's underwear spread out across its surface. Front and center sat an open bottle of wine with 2 half-filled glasses. No coasters. That little insult stung more than I expected. She never respected that table, never valued what it meant or what it cost me to make. I lowered the saw and opened the closet, pulling out the designer backpack she'd had to have when she started her new job. Expensive, pretentious, and unused for months. I unzipped it and began stuffing it with whatever I could grab off the table: a black dress, tights. Then came the men's clothes, a shirt, socks. Off to the side, I spotted his pants and his wallet. I flipped it open. The name on the ID didn't surprise me. Outside, music was blaring through the walls. Danielle's doing. She loved her music loud, always had. In this case, it was fortunate. Otherwise, she and her little guest might have heard the sound of a multi-ton tree reducing their precious vehicles to twisted scrap. They'd find out soon enough. And it'd be quite a moment, considering I'd prepped the site with 10 buckets of cat litter stacked neatly under their cars, just in case. I grabbed Danielle's purse, pulled out her keys and wallet, then tossed the rest into the backpack. My mind wandered to that shiny new truck she was so obsessed with, her pride and joy. She decked it out to match her best friend's ride in nearly every detail. The only real difference? Danielle's ran on gas. Her friend's was diesel. Danielle's truck was brand new, completely paid off, if she even traded in her BMW to cover the full cost. Travis's truck? Not so lucky. Still owed about $32,000 on it, last I heard. And then, because Danielle had the financial instincts of a toddler, she let her friend talk her into dropping full coverage insurance in favor of the bare minimum. Liability only. I'd warned her, told her it was reckless. But when did she ever listen to me? Now her truck, fully paid off, top trim, loaded with every possible feature, was a mangled heap. And Travis? Well, he was left with a truck-sized debt and no truck to show for it. That's what happens when people think shortcuts are smarter than good sense. Interesting. With the chainsaw gripped in one hand and the overstuffed backpack in the other, I walked steadily toward the bedroom door. The music was pounding so loudly that the hallway walls practically vibrated from the bass. But beneath the noise, I could still make out what they must have thought were private, drawn-out, muffled moans. I tried the doorknob. Locked? Of course. Danielle always locked the door, even when we were the only ones home. No kids, no chance of a surprise guest. Just another controlling habit she refused to let go of, like so many others. I dropped the backpack beside the absurdly expensive suitcase she demanded we buy last spring, because real professionals travel in style, she had said. Then I took a step back, wrapped both hands around the chainsaw's grip, and pulled the starter cord. The roar of the engine drowned out the music in an instant. From inside, I heard them panic, the kind of primal scream that only comes when the illusion of privacy gets shattered by raw noise and steel teeth. The chain ripped effortlessly through the door, carving clean around the lock in seconds. A single push, and the door swung open like a trapdoor to hell. There was Travis, naked, motionless, his expression frozen in pure fear. He looked like someone caught halfway through a bad decision. Meanwhile, Danielle was curled into the blankets, fake tears already flowing, scrambling to cover herself like modesty had suddenly become a virtue. Like any of this still meant something. I locked eyes with Travis and gave the saw one cold, slow rev. The chain spun lazily, threateningly, just enough to make my point. He flinched. "The door's through me," I said calmly. "The window's all yours. Make your move, jumper." I'd always wanted to say that line, just never pictured it playing out quite like this. Travis's eyes ping-ponged between me and Danielle for a second. Then instinct took over. Without a word, he dove for the window, shattering the glass and screen in a single, desperate leap. I sighed. Perfect. One more thing to replace. Honestly, I didn't think he'd actually jump. I walked up to the jagged frame and looked outside. He was sprawled on the lawn, groaning and clutching his ankle. Even from here, I could tell it was broken. He wasn't going anywhere fast. I turned back to Danielle, who was now full-on sobbing and trying to stammer out excuses. "It's not what it looks like. You've got it all wrong. You're blowing this way out of." "Danielle, shut up." She froze mid-sentence. Her mouth snapped shut like I'd slapped her. She wasn't used to hearing me speak that way, not used to me taking control. "Listen closely," I said, keeping my voice low and deliberate. "Because I'm only going to explain this once." I let the silence hang between us long enough to make her squirm. Then I continued. "Rachel's already on her way. She'll be here in 15 minutes, maybe 10 if she's speeding. Keep that in mind. Also, she just picked up a brand new 12-gauge yesterday. I'm assuming you can connect the dots." Danielle's eyes widened in panic. She nodded quickly, her face pale and streaked with tears. Good. Then here's how this goes, I said, voice steady. You're going to pack whatever you can cram into that overpriced suitcase you just had to have. Your backpack's already loaded, has all your boyfriend's crap, your dress, your purse, everything that was thrown across the coffee table downstairs. I took a step closer. Our shared credit cards? Gone. Joint accounts? Frozen. But your personal one still works, for now. His wallet? Also missing a few things. His bank card. His ID. I figured Rachel might find a use for those. Danielle gave another shaky nod, silent now, her sobs turning into sniffles. I looked away for a second, gathering myself. No matter how justified I felt, this still stung more than I'd prepared for. A decade of shared life doesn't just flick off like a switch. Your truck? Travis's truck? Both totaled. I continued. A tree came down about 5 minutes ago. Must have been hard to hear it with all the noise. She gasped. Take the back door, I said. Rachel's coming up the front, and the press is already here. Reporters, cameras, all of it. I'd suggest you help your wounded prince limp his sorry ass out of here. Find a cab. Get to an ER. He's not walking out of this place under his own power. I waited to see if she understood. Then I gave her one final truth. And if it's not already clear, we're done. Divorce papers are in the suitcase. Consider yourself served. Don't come back. Not unless you're with law enforcement. Danielle collapsed into tears again, shaking with quiet sobs. I turned and walked out. I needed to be outside before Rachel showed up. Her temper was infamous, and the last thing I needed was a firearm making this situation worse. I didn't know when their little affair started, and I didn't care. It was enough that it had. For the last month, I kept quiet, pretending not to notice the signs. It had taken every shred of self-control to keep the anger buried. There were moments, way too many, where I wanted to end both of them. And honestly, if either one had been sitting in those trucks when the tree came down, I don't know if I would have stopped myself. Thankfully, I snapped out of that spiral before it became permanent. Now, all I could do was keep Rachel from doing something she couldn't take back. As I stepped off the porch, the crowd that had gathered outside drifted closer. News crews recorded everything. The fallen tree, the wreckage of the trucks, the damage in the yard. Walt was already at the scene, leaning casually against what used to be the driver's side door of Danielle's crushed truck. Chatting with a reporter like this was just another afternoon. He's one of the good ones, I heard Walt say. Always helping out the old-timers, never asks for a thing in return. Just a damn solid man. The reporter, caked in too much makeup, with the practiced sympathy of someone used to faking concern on camera, glanced at me carefully. Would you describe him as dangerous, given how he handles a chainsaw? She asked Walt, trying not to sound too eager. Walt burst into a booming laugh. Dangerous? Ma'am, that man over there is the best damn lumberjack in the whole state, he said, grinning in my direction. Doesn't miss, doesn't mess up. Drops trees right where he says he will, every single time. He held her gaze and added, 10 years in a row, he was state fair champ. I've seen him bring down 55-footers in gale force winds and still land them perfectly. No, he ain't dangerous with a saw, unless you give him a reason to be. The smirk that followed sent a ripple of laughter through the small crowd. I sighed and rubbed my hand down my face. The last thing I needed was Walt turning me into some kind of folk legend. If this ever landed in court, his endorsement wasn't exactly going to work in my favor. And then I heard it, the unmistakable growl of diesel engines. I looked up. My old logging crew had arrived. Roy's truck pulled up with his hydraulic log splitter hitched to the back. That could only mean one thing. They weren't just here to visit. They were here to help turn that massive tree into firewood. Mick was the first to hop out. He gave me a once-over, eyes scanning, like he was checking for damage. Eli, how you holding up? He asked. I let out a breath. Been better, Mick. He scratched his chin thoughtfully. Yeah, figured as much. Then his mouth tugged into a smirk. Gotta say, though, the cat litter? Genius move. Cat litter, another voice called out. Roy had stepped around the side of his truck, grinning. Man, we were all wondering why you bought 10 20-pound buckets of that stuff last week. Thought maybe you'd secretly adopted a dozen cats. Mick nodded. Smart thinking, though. I shot them both a hard look. Let's not spread that around, all right? Last thing I need is the city complaining about oil or antifreeze near the storm drains. A laugh came from behind Mick. Note to self, never get on your bad side. Dean stepped forward and clasped my hand in a firm shake. Normally, he had a goofy grin glued to his face, but not today. His expression was heavier, more serious. "So, my idiot brother still breathing?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Pretty sure he shattered his ankle diving out my bedroom window. Lucky for him, he missed the jacuzzi. Cleaning out that mess would have been a nightmare." Dean let out a long breath and shook his head. "Eli, man, I don't know what to say. I've never understood what was wrong with him. He's my brother, sure, but honestly, sometimes I think the hospital gave our parents the wrong kid." "It's not on you, Dean," I replied. "But I didn't think he'd do this. And I sure as hell didn't think Danielle would." That last word hit hard, and the silence that followed felt like it lasted a full minute. Mick broke it. "Once the news folks pack up, we'll get started. Dean, grab your saw. I'll get the belt set so we can haul logs off that mess." "Eli, okay if I park the trailer in your driveway." Before I could answer, Roy stepped up, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "Hey, Roy," I said. "Eli," he replied. Just my name, but with the weight of an apology behind it. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, let's get to work. Mi casa es su casa." Roy lingered for a beat, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, man. I know." "You knew," I cut in, voice calm but firm. "You and Sandra both knew about it. And you didn't say anything because you were afraid of how I'd react. I get it. Doesn't mean it didn't gut me." Roy's face twisted with guilt. "Damn it, Eli. I didn't know what to do. Sandra's been close with Danielle forever. And you? You're like a brother." She kept saying Danielle was going to end things soon, that she had her reasons. But deep down, I knew better. You didn't deserve this. I didn't know how to tell you." I met his eyes and spoke with as much steadiness as I could muster. "I get it, and I forgive you. But it doesn't change anything. It's broken now. Completely." Roy nodded, jaw tight. "Yeah." He hesitated, then added, "Sandra's torn up too. I finally told her everything last night. She called earlier, said all this is already blowing up on TV. Apparently, they aired footage of Travis jumping out your window." Bear asked. I asked, raising an eyebrow. Roy chuckled despite himself. "Walt got most of it on camera. But I'm guessing the news station got a few flattering angles too." I couldn't help the smirk. Might be worth framing for the scrapbook. I turned away for a moment, needing to clear my head, and that's when I saw it. Rachel's truck came barreling down the road like a missile. My stomach sank. This was going to get ugly. She didn't so much brake as launch into a stop, tires screeching just feet away from me. The door flew open, and there she was, wild-eyed, furious, and holding a shotgun like it had something personal to settle. The unmistakable cha-chunk of a pump action echoed down the block. To my left, the news crew instinctively backed up, their faces torn between fear and the adrenaline rush of catching chaos on camera. "Rachel," I said, steady as I could, put the gun down. "They're gone." Travis busted his ankle jumping out the window. Danielle took him to the hospital. I wasn't sure if that part was true, but I had to believe Danielle had at least that much sense left. Because when Rachel blew up, she didn't throw tantrums, she detonated. Her hands were white-knuckling the gun. "I'll end them both," she growled, eyes glassy with rage. "That smug bastard and that backstabbing." "Rachel." I stepped closer. "It's done. And no matter what they did, if you pull that trigger, you're the one who'll lose everything. Trust me, I nearly went down that road myself." Her nostrils flared. "And what stopped you?" "Walt," I said, glancing his way. "Told me he liked having me around. Didn't want to visit me behind bars for the next 2 decades. I let that sit for a second before continuing. And if you go through with this, that's exactly where you'll end up. You really think they're worth that?" She was breathing hard now, chest heaving, eyes darting. Then her grip began to loosen. The gun lowered just slightly. "Eli, after everything, after what they did right under our noses." Her voice cracked, and the tears came. I took my chance. I stepped in, gently took the weapon from her trembling hands, and set it in the passenger seat of her truck. Then I grabbed the keys from the ignition, locked the doors, and tucked the keys into my pocket. Turning back, I pulled her into a hug. For a long, silent moment, we just stood there. The crowd watched. The cameras rolled. The whole mess, the trucks, the tree, the fallout, surrounded us like wreckage after a storm. Then a voice called softly from behind. "Rachel, honey, come sit with me a while." We turned to see Mrs. Fraser standing beside what remained of Danielle's truck, arms open, her face kind. Rachel sniffled, gave a slight nod, and slowly walked toward her. She didn't say a word. I glanced around for the judge, but didn't see him. Probably stuck in court today. Couldn't blame him for missing the show. Rachel paused, halfway to Mrs. Fraser, and looked back over her shoulder. You coming, Eli? I shook my head. Nah, I said. Still got firewood to chop before dark. Better to knock it out while I still had a few extra sets of hands around. Mrs. Connolly gave me a lingering look, sharp and unreadable, then finally nodded with quiet authority. Come see me in an hour, Charles. I'll be expecting you. I met her gaze and dipped my head respectfully. Yes, ma'am. 1 hour. Behind me, I heard my buddies murmuring, already back in old form. Back to hiding behind the ladies again, huh? One of them called out with a grin. Yeah, he figures if the older women get worried, they'll keep him company and save him from having to do any real work, another teased. Someone hollered, Hey, Eli, you think we'll get all this wood split before sundown? Looks like a whole damn mountain. I waved them off with a grumble. Yeah, I hear you. But don't act like you don't know. When Mrs. Connolly tells you to be somewhere, you don't keep her waiting. That got a round of laughter, and they went back to it, chainsaws revving and wedges thumping. I turned away to rejoin them, and then I heard it. Eli Mercer, you're under arrest. The voice cut through the air like a blade. I stopped, slowly turned. 2 local officers stood by their cruiser, trying way too hard to look like they belonged in a Clint Eastwood movie. Cameras still rolling, the work site froze. My crew stopped what they were doing, eyeing the cops with a mix of disbelief and barely contained hostility. I raised one hand in a lazy wave. For what? I asked, arms crossed now. One of them, barely old enough to shave, smirked. Destruction of private property. Vandalism. Attempted homicide. He shrugged. And whatever else we dig up while we're at it. I arched an eyebrow. Oh, and don't forget cutting down the tree, I said. That should add nicely to my rap sheet, right? The cop straightened, looking like he was trying to appear more official. Actually, yeah, that too. I gave a low chuckle. Well, for starters, I had permission to cut that tree down. Second, the fact that it landed on those 2 trucks? That's just what we call an unfortunate coincidence. You got proof it was intentional. I stepped toward them slowly, lowering my voice just enough to make their posturing falter. And one more thing, attempted homicide? Come on, let's be honest. If I'd actually wanted that man dead, do you really think he'd still be breathing right now? A long, uncomfortable silence followed. They shifted on their feet, glancing at each other, realizing they may have overreached. I gave them a tight smile. Now, why don't you go ahead and walk away while the cameras are still rolling? Or do you want the whole county watching you make fools of yourselves? They hesitated. Then, wordlessly, they turned and walked back toward their cruiser. The judge I'd mentioned wasn't just some name to drop. He was a close neighbor, someone who'd been in my living room more than once. And the last thing these rookies wanted was to find themselves answering to him on the wrong side of a bad decision. An hour later, I made my way down to Mrs. Connolly's place. The guys were still going at it, Roy manning the splitter, others hauling split logs to her barn in pickup loads. As I passed, they waved and tossed more jabs my way. Look at Eli, always showing up when the work's already done. I just smiled and kept walking. Honestly, I needed the break. Today had taken more out of me than I wanted to admit. Inside her home, I sank into the familiar embrace of an old armchair. Across from me, Rachel sat quieter than before. Her eyes were red and swollen, but the volcanic fury had cooled. I pulled her truck keys from my pocket and dropped them into her lap. You've had some time to cool off, I said gently. I don't need to worry about you doing anything reckless anymore, right? She exhaled, running a hand through her tangled hair. Yeah, I think I'm done with that kind of hunting, she muttered. But tomorrow, I'll be hunting for a damn good lawyer. I nodded. My guy said he's willing to help if you want him. He's already got a decent file on both of them. But if you'd rather use someone else, I get it. Rachel thought about it for a second. I'll talk to him. I heard she's the best in town. That got a small smile from me. Then that settles it. She studied me, brow furrowed with concern. How are you holding up, Eli? Really? I let out a slow breath. I'll make it. But yeah, it stings. 10 years of your life doesn't just disappear cleanly. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. You and I were carrying the same kind of hurt. Maybe we lean on each other now and then. Just to talk. Nothing else. Rachel's lips curled into the faintest smile. That's just like you. Still looking after everyone else while you're bleeding, too. She nodded. But yeah, I think we'll be all right. Eventually. Right now, though, I don't think I have it in me to feel anything for a long time. I get it, I said softly. Then she smirked, the first real trace of humor I'd seen from her all day. So, what was it like? Watching the tree take out their trucks. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Felt damn good. I hated bringing that tree down, but at least it got some poetic use. She laughed with me, a real, cathartic laugh. Bet Travis is regretting switching his insurance now. How much does he still owe? I guessed, 31 grand? Give or take, she confirmed with a nod. I let out a long whistle. Phew, that's a heavy loss. But not nearly as painful as what you're about to do to him, I'm guessing. Rachel's smile widened, eyes gleaming. Oh, trust me. He has no idea what's coming. I leaned back, arms crossed loosely. You think he and Danielle will stay together? She snorted. Not a chance in hell. The second he's discharged, he'll vanish. This isn't his first rodeo, and she's about to find out the hard way. If she sticks around, then frankly, she deserves every ounce of misery that follows. I gave a shrug. Well, at least he's got his business to fall back on. That's something, right? Rachel burst out laughing. A full, loud, head-back laugh. I frowned. What? She wiped a tear from her eye. Eli, you actually thought it was his business? I blinked. Yeah, hasn't he been running it for years? I figured you just worked with him. She shook her head, amusement radiating off her. No, Eli. He played that role well, I'll give him that. But it was never his. The land, the buildings, the equipment, the name, it's all mine. I inherited it from my uncle. I built it from the ground up. She leaned in, her voice calm and certain. Travis was just a glorified manager. A hired hand in his own little fantasy. I stared at her, stunned. Damn, you're telling me he doesn't own a single thing? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around it. Rachel grinned, sharp and satisfied. Not a damn thing. I leaned back in my seat, letting that sink in. Well then, looks like you're going to be just fine. Probably better off than me, to be honest. She gave me a knowing smile, one that said she wasn't just being kind, she meant it. Eli, you'll be all right. I know you better than you think. And this town? It respects you. You've got roots here, real ones. You'll land on your feet. Trust me. Danielle, well, just thinking about her name now made my jaw tighten. I didn't have to say it. I could already hear Rachel mentally writing the end of my ex-wife's reputation, and probably her career, with just a few choice words. Before I could get too lost in that thought, Mrs. Connolly stepped into the room, carrying a tray with 3 cups of coffee, steady as ever. She placed the tray on the side table with the ease of someone who'd been hosting people for longer than I'd been alive, then gave me a pointed look. So, young man, she asked, eyes narrowed, have you spoken with the judge yet? I shook my head. Not yet, ma'am. Timing doesn't feel right. Her expression stiffened instantly. Call him, she said flatly. Set up a meeting. He's furious over what happened, absolutely livid at both Travis and Danielle. And let me tell you, he thinks the world of you. Just like I do. I sighed, rubbing a hand over my face. Judge Connolly can't really do anything about all this, ma'am. She gave me a look so sharp it could have sliced lumber. Oh, don't be naive, son. Of course he can. You've already filed for divorce, haven't you? A judge is going to oversee the case, and this one has your back. He told me so himself. You're not going through this alone. I shook my head again. With all due respect, ma'am, the judge doesn't owe me a thing. Mrs. Connolly scoffed at that, waving her hand like I just said something truly stupid. Charles, please. You've done more for this family over the years than you even realize. And I'm not just talking about firewood. You've always shown up for everyone, including me. Even when Travis started pulling his little tricks and stirring up trouble, you never treated me any different. I exhaled slowly and met her gaze. That's a separate issue. Not really, she said, her voice suddenly stern again. Travis may carry our family name, but don't kid yourself, he's a disgrace. I may be his grandmother, but I have no illusions about what he is. What he did today, it won't be forgotten by our family, and certainly not in any way we'd be proud of. I swallowed hard. Her words had more weight than I expected. You were his best friend, Eli, she continued. If anyone should have known better, it was him. He owed you more than this, and we all know it. Truth be told, we were just hoping you wouldn't kill him. Though between you and me, he had it coming. Her honesty hit like a log to the gut. No sugarcoating, no small talk. Just raw, unfiltered truth. That's what makes all this so damn painful, she added softly. We care about you. Even Travis, in his messed up, twisted way. And knowing how deeply he hurt you? It's eating us alive. I nodded slowly, throat tight. I appreciate that, ma'am. It's been a rough one. Tough, she scoffed. Charles, that's the understatement of the year. Then her eyes narrowed again, with a glint of humor behind them. By the way, why don't you go ahead and call me Old Connolly to my face? I know that's what you say when you think I'm not listening. I felt the blood rush to my face. Rachel practically jumped in her seat. Wait, you knew about that? Mrs. Connolly chuckled. Of course I knew. Dear, I know everything. She turned back to me with a half-smile. And Eli, you really should have known better. You think I don't know what people call me behind my back? I like it. Wear it proudly, in fact. I laughed nervously. Yes, ma'am. Fair enough. She waved her hand again. No need to apologize. I've always taken it as a badge of honor. Around here, the second someone says Old Connolly, everyone knows exactly who they mean. And don't think for 1 second it's ever said without respect. Maybe a little edge, but always with respect. I'm no fragile flower. Yes, ma'am. Then her tone shifted back to business. Now quit stalling and call the judge. He's waiting to hear from you, and he's got plenty to say. Take it from someone who's known him for nearly 50 years. When that man gives advice, it's worth listening to. Yes, ma'am. You ever feel like a 12-year-old who just got caught skipping class? That's the effect Mrs. Connolly had. She saw straight through your armor and hit you dead center with truth. She didn't tolerate nonsense, but if you were honest with her, she'd back you to the grave. The judge, her husband, was no different. They weren't just respected around here. They were this town's backbone, which made it all the harder to accept that Travis and Dean were cut from their family tree. A reminder that even strong roots can sprout weak limbs. Mrs. Connolly studied me carefully again. Are you planning to actually kick her out, Charles? I nodded. Already served her the papers. Last I heard, she drove Travis to the hospital. She nodded, satisfied. Good. He snapped his ankle. Lucky that's all he broke. We were honestly worried you might have snapped his neck or taken a shot at him. I smirked. You saw that tree drop, right? Cleanest fall I've done in years. Mrs. Connolly's eyes twinkled. That was something else. Picture perfect. I assume you're already spinning this as a basic tree job gone a little sideways. I hesitated. There was more internal stress in the trunk than I expected. It leaned further than I calculated. She laughed, full-bodied and knowing. Stick with that poker face, son. You'll need it. But I was there. I know what happened. And so does everyone else in this town who's ever watched you drop a tree. I exhaled. Yeah, that's what worries me. She nodded slowly, her face serious again. That's exactly why the judge wants to talk to you. He's got legal advice you'll want to hear, Mrs. Connolly said firmly. He just wants to make sure you don't end up tangled in the very system he helps run. She gave me that long, deliberate look, the kind that said she saw more than I probably realized. You do know he's genuinely concerned about you, right? We all are. I met her gaze. Thank you, ma'am. Her expression softened just a little. And for what it's worth, smart thinking with the cat litter under those trucks. You made sure nothing nasty like oil or antifreeze ran into the storm drain. That tells me everything I need to know. I felt my face heat up again. Across the room, Rachel was studying me with something like fresh eyes, like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. Did you plan all of this? She asked quietly. Before I could even open my mouth, Mrs. Connolly let out a hearty laugh. Rachel, dear. I thought you knew. Eli doesn't do anything without a plan. The only thing he didn't anticipate was Travis snapping his ankle. That was just dumb luck. But the rest? That was all him. Rachel leaned back, shaking her head in disbelief. Remind me never to get on your bad side, Eli. It's not that serious, I said, brushing it off. She tilted her head at me. You could have gotten to him when he was still in the truck. You had every opportunity. Why didn't you? I shrugged. Because they're not worth me spending 20 years behind bars. They made their bed. Now they get to lie in it. Rachel let out a tired breath. She really loved that truck, you know. I nodded. Yeah, Rachel. I know. She hesitated for a moment, then added softly, probably more than she ever loved you. I didn't say anything. Mrs. Connolly came closer and placed a hand on my shoulder, steady, warm, and full of something I hadn't felt much of lately, kindness. I think we all underestimated how much of yourself you gave to that relationship, Charles. I'm sorry it ended like this. I kept my tone even. It is what it is. She rolled her eyes. Enough with the ma'am business. I like Old Connolly. Use it. I chuckled, shaking my head. All right. Old Connolly. It still felt strange saying it out loud, but she clearly wore the nickname like a badge of honor. I should probably get back to the guys, I said, glancing toward the door. Still got wood to split. She raised an eyebrow. Son, they finished that over an hour ago. Roy and Dean just finished unloading the last of it into my shed. She smiled. Those boys move fast when they've got proper motivation. And I imagine they wouldn't mind a few cold beers after all that work. Not a bad idea, old Connolly. I'll take them down to the tavern. Just as I turned to leave, she stopped me with one final look. Charles, listen to me. No matter how this plays out, you're a good man. One of the best I've ever known. Don't let this mess make you forget that. I nodded, voice quiet. I hear you, ma'am. I hugged both Rachel and old Connolly before stepping outside. That night at the tavern, the beer went down smooth, and the company was even better. The guys kept things light, throwing out jokes, teasing, making me laugh even with the weight of the day still clinging to my shoulders. They were the kind of friends worth holding on to. Dean, as always, was nothing like his brother. He told me more than once that he must have been swapped at birth, because there was no way he shared DNA with Travis. You've always felt more like a brother than he ever has, he'd said to me before. But now, after everything, those words felt heavier. They stuck. For the next 4 nights, the house was mine alone. Too big. Too quiet. Walt told me later that a buddy of his had heard Danielle was staying with her parents. Not that it surprised me. Her folks weren't thrilled about the situation, but family tends to circle the wagons, even when the one they're protecting is the problem. One evening, the phone rang. It was the judge. He asked how I was holding up, then got to the real reason he called. He had legal advice to give. He didn't want to see me in a courtroom under the wrong kind of circumstances, not after how close I'd already come by felling that tree exactly the way I had. He'd already started smoothing things over behind the scenes. Nothing shady, nothing illegal. Just making sure I had a clear path. Making sure I knew how to keep the narrative clean, avoid the traps, handle the divorce the right way. He told me how to phrase things, what not to say, how to avoid inviting scrutiny from the wrong people. And most of all, how to ensure Danielle couldn't sink her claws into anything she didn't deserve. 2 months passed. 2 long months filled with delay after delay from Danielle's lawyer. But then, one morning, the judge had clearly had enough. He slammed that gavel so hard I thought the bench might crack. I'm done with this, he barked. This case is closed. I am granting Mr. Charles Masters' divorce petition under the original terms, no changes, no appeals. And counselor, if you say one more word, I will hold you in contempt. Danielle's lawyer blinked, visibly rattled. Your Honor, my client, she believes she's entitled to more. She contributed to. The judge leaned forward, his voice cold enough to freeze the room. Son, if you speak again, I'll personally see to it you're in a cell learning some manners. Are we clear? The lawyer swallowed hard. Yes, Your Honor. Then the judge turned to Danielle. His expression shifted not towards sympathy, but something closer to quiet disappointment. Danielle, before you leave, I want to say something. With that, we were dismissed. I walked out into the fresh air, but a part of me couldn't stop wondering what exactly he had to say to her behind that closed door. Inside, she sat in his office, staring down at her hands. Danielle, the judge began, his voice calm but unwavering. I don't understand what you thought you were achieving here. She said nothing. I know you didn't want this divorce, but you paraded your affair around like it was some kind of trophy. You threw it in Charles's face at every chance. For what? He sighed, shaking his head. You traded in a perfectly good car for a truck just so it could look like his. Why? What was the point? She couldn't answer. Truth was, she'd been asking herself the same question for weeks. And the only response she ever came up with, the only one that fit, was this. Because I could. And for the first time, even she couldn't deny it anymore. She hated herself for it. What started as a bit of fun, something casual, harmless even, spiraled into something she could never have imagined. At first, it was just a thrill, a secret she thought she could walk away from whenever she wanted. But somewhere along the way, she'd set fire to everything she'd built. Her mind kept circling back to the morning it all came crashing down. The roar of the chainsaw slicing through the bedroom door. The sharp crack of the lock giving way. Travis's pale, frozen face. Her own stomach twisting in panic. In that instant, she was certain Eli was going to kill her. And the strangest thing? She didn't think about Travis. Not even a little. She didn't care whether he lived or died. All she could think about was escape, getting out, staying alive. She only took Travis to the hospital because Eli had told her to. because he'd calmly laid it out, and she instinctively knew that following his instructions was the only way to stay clear of Rachel. She hadn't questioned it. She'd done what he said, because even in that moment, she understood it would be the last time she ever followed his lead. And then there was the truck. He'd destroyed it so deliberately, so calmly, like it was just another log on the pile. And watching it happen, it finally hit her. She had never really seen Eli for who he was. She had brushed aside every small effort, ignored the quiet ways he cared for her. She had taken it all for granted. He had protected her, even when she didn't deserve it. Even when she'd betrayed him in the worst possible way, he had chosen not to lash out. He didn't humiliate her publicly. He didn't scream or plead. He just let her go. Now he didn't even look at her. And when he did, it was a passing glance. Distant. Cold. Like she was someone he barely remembered. And the worst part wasn't the loss of him. It was the fact that the entire town had seen it happen. She could feel it everywhere. The glances in the grocery store, the awkward silences at the post office, the subtle way people stopped meeting her eyes. Whispers behind hands. Half-finished sentences that trailed off when she walked by. She had become the town scandal. And for what? For Travis? For some fleeting excitement that hadn't lasted? For sex that wasn't even satisfying? She didn't love Travis. She never had. The truth was, she had just assumed Eli would always be there. That no matter what she did, how careless or cruel she became, he'd pick up the pieces and put things back together. It had never occurred to her there might be a line. One final betrayal he wouldn't come back from. But there was. And she'd crossed it. Now she hadn't just lost Eli. She'd lost everything. His trust, the respect of the community, and most painfully, the affection of people who once treated her like family. Mrs. Connolly, the woman who had once embraced her as one of her own, who had stood by her before she'd even figured out how to stand up for herself. Now, she barely acknowledged her. A cool nod at best. Danielle remembered seeing her in the grocery store not long after the blow-up. There had been no scene, just a single look from Mrs. Connolly. A quiet, unmistakable message of disappointment. She didn't say a word, but Danielle understood completely. That hurt more than anything. And for what? A meaningless fling with Eli's supposed best friend? A man who, the moment everything collapsed, had looked at her with smug satisfaction and walked away like it wasn't his life he'd helped destroy? In hindsight, it all seemed so clear. Love wasn't about what you got. It was about what you gave. And Danielle had never really given anything. She had taken and expected it to last forever, without realizing how rare it actually was. I was sitting on the porch of the cabin that day, watching the late light play across the hills. Walt had owned the place for years, but after I sold the house and wrapped up the divorce, he offered it to me. I knew about the cabin, sure, but I hadn't realized it came with 700 acres until the papers were in front of me. Walt, I said, shaking my head, you're seriously selling this to me for 72 grand? Just the land's worth millions. People are going to think I conned you, or that you finally lost it. Walt just crossed his arms and gave me one of those looks that shut down any argument. First off, I have lost it. We all know that, he said. Second, it's my land. I can sell it for whatever I damn well please. Third, I've already turned down 3 developers who offered way more than what you're paying. I let out a sigh. Because you don't want them to bulldoze it and build another cookie-cutter subdivision. He nodded. Exactly. I know you'll take care of it. That's worth more than money. I rubbed a hand down my face. Walt, this land could make you a fortune. For the right people, sure, he said. But for me? For you? It's priceless. I started to protest again, but he cut me off. No buts, son. You buying this land means no developer ever gets to touch it. And besides, I really like the folks you sold your house to. Young couple, good energy. I raised an eyebrow. You know, I could have gotten triple the price from that slime ball who made an offer. Walt smirked. Yeah, and why didn't you? I leaned back, exhaling. Because he didn't deserve it. And because that couple reminded me of how things used to feel back when life was good. I wanted that house to stay a home, not turn into someone's weekend flip project. Walt looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Exactly. Now I see, I said with a grin. Took you long enough. Walt chuckled, but his smile faded into something more serious. Eli, take care of this place, all right? It's peaceful up here. Keep it that way. And he was right. From my porch, I could see it all, the sweeping valley below, the faint city lights blinking in the distance, even the neighborhood I used to call home. Over time, That little cabin had become more than just a quiet place to sleep. I built onto it, added a wraparound deck, a hot tub nestled in the corner, a garage, a barn with a sloped tin roof, and a full workshop. It still had the soul of a cabin, but now it felt like a sanctuary. I restored the old paddock out back and started leasing space to city folks who needed somewhere to keep their horses. 700 acres of private land, plus the national forest next door, gave them miles of trails to ride. Between that and managing timber sales on nearby lots, my life settled into something rare, simple, and steady. Walt still visited on weekends. So did the judge. And of course, old Connolly. My other buddies would swing by from time to time, too. I hadn't seen Danielle since the day we signed the papers. And if I'm being honest, I missed her, but not the lies, not the way she wrecked everything. I missed the woman she'd been in the early days, when it felt like we were building something real. I didn't want her back, but I did wish things hadn't ended so bitterly. Some lessons don't come easy. Some mistakes don't come with a reset button. Eventually, after a string of easygoing dates that didn't go anywhere, I started seeing someone. She was different. Not flashy or dramatic, just solid. Grounded. She said what she meant, followed through on what she promised. And for the first time in a long while, I found myself thinking, maybe this could be something. Letting someone in again wasn't easy. Not after everything. I had walls, hell, I had fortifications. But she didn't try to tear them down. She just chipped at them, little by little, patient and steady. And the strangest part? I already knew her. She was the same reporter who had been covering the day I felled the tree. Natalie. We crossed paths again when she came up to interview me about sustainable logging practices. I asked her out on a whim. The rest just kind of happened. She still has that infamous photo, the one of the massive tree flattening Danielle and Travis's trucks. It made the rounds online, turned into memes, novelty cards, even got printed on coffee mugs. Natalie, being sharp as hell, sold the rights to it. That photo now hangs framed on my mantle. Walt always chuckles when he sees it, not just because of the picture itself, but because the frame it sits in is made from the very tree that started all the chaos. And above the fireplace, mounted like a relic, is something else. Not a hunting trophy. Not a family heirloom. Just a Johnsard chainsaw, the same one I used that day. It hasn't touched a log since. But now and then, Natalie asks me to fire it up, just to hear it hum. Every time I do, she watches it with a mix of awe and nerves, her eyes flicking between the saw and me. One evening, I caught her staring. "What's on your mind?" I asked. She hesitated. Then, softly, "I guess I just never realized how powerful that thing is." She's told me more than once that Danielle made the biggest mistake of her life. And I don't argue. She's right. In the end, Danielle lost the truck she adored and wound up with, well, not absolutely nothing, but close enough. One thing's for sure, she doesn't have me. And I know that eats away at her more than she'll ever admit. Natalie, though, she's calm, confident, grounded in who she is and what she wants. She knows exactly what kind of man I am, the kind who values loyalty. Always have. Always will. I've seen what betrayal looks like up close. I've felt the weight of it. And I've learned that trust, once shattered, doesn't always come back. If you ever stop to look closely at the wood frame around that famous photo, you'll notice something under the varnish, dark stains baked into the grain. Oil. Antifreeze. Marks from the wreckage. They soaked in before I ever had a chance to seal the wood, and now they're part of it forever. Fitting, really. It's a quiet reminder of what truly matters, and what never should have been forgotten in the first place. Months passed. Life found its rhythm. The town moved on to fresher gossip, newer stories. But some memories stuck around. I still ran into folks who'd clap me on the back, give a subtle nod, or pass a look that said more than words ever could. "You handled it." Walt, being Walt, never missed a chance to rib me. "You know, Eli," he said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun disappear behind the hills, "I've seen a lot in my time. But you? You turned revenge into an art form." I just laughed, shaking my head. "It wasn't revenge, Walt. It was closure. Call it whatever you want," he said with a grin. "But if anyone ever screws me over like that, I want you on my team." I didn't answer, just stared out at the horizon, at the acres I never expected to own, the peace I never thought I'd find. Danielle had moved out of town. I'd heard whispers about her trying to start over somewhere new, but I didn't bother chasing down the details. Some chapters are better left closed. Travis? He didn't land nearly as softly. Between the debt from the truck he never paid off, Rachel wringing him dry in court, and losing the business that was never his to begin with, He ended up damn near broke. Stripped of all that posturing, all that smugness. Do I feel sorry for him? No. You make your choices in life. Then you live with the consequences.